Denis Hayes, thank you very much for joining us. In 1970, would you have been surprised to hear that Earth Day would still be alive and functioning and flourishing in 2020?
Oh, absolutely. We would have been quite surprised at the thought that it would happen in 1971. It was a one-time event, initially thought of as a college teach-in by Senator Gaylord Nelson, who was the progenitor of the idea, the founder. Yeah. And then it evolved into a big, huge community-based thing called Earth Day. And it turned out to be enormous with 20 million participants. And of course, that was sort of on the model of the March on Selma, the March on Washington, D.C., the March on the Pentagon. It was a big one-time event to focus public attention on an issue. And I was worried that if it happened again in 1971, it would be much smaller. And the reporting would all be, well, the steam's gone out of the environmental movement. That was one more fad. Mm-hmm. So I did my best to kill it. It was just too resilient. It just kept on going. Then finally in 1990, we decided this is going to go on forever. Let's see if we can take it international.
How would you summarize the sort of political impact of the early Earth Days?
Well, it was something that was just gigantic by the standards of an organized event. I mean, on the order of perhaps 10 times larger than the largest of the anti-war events. Mm-hmm. So it certainly got everyone's attention, but the generalized perception among politicians, when you're thinking of politics, was that it was a bunch of kids having a good time, going out in the park, talking about pollution, wearing costumes and gas masks, but not a big deal. A week after Earth Day, Nixon invaded Cambodia. A bit after that, a few students were shot and killed at one of our universities. And the environment just kind of blew off for a bit. Then that fall, the same group that had been the young organizers of that first Earth Day launched a campaign called the Dirty Dozen. Yeah. This was against 12 members of Congress with terrible environmental records, and we succeeded in defeating 7 out of 12, including the chairman of the Pork Committee, the committee called the House Public Works Committee, that if you wanted a bridge or a dam or a federal building or something, that guy had the power. And when he went down in a primary election, clearly on an environmental issue, then suddenly those 20 million people were a political force to be reckoned with. Mm-hmm. And as a consequence, in relatively short order, the president, who was not much of an environmentalist, figured he had to be a player and set up an environmental protection agency with an executive order. Mm-hmm. The Clean Air Act, which was a really, really far-reaching piece of legislation, passed on a voice vote in the US Senate and with only one dissent in the House of Representatives. And then with all of that momentum, rather quickly in the next 7, 8, 9 years, we passed the Clean Water Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Marine Mammal Protection Act, the Toxic Substances Control Act, the Environmental Education Act. It just went on, Superfund, National Forest Protection Act. There was this period when we just pulled that pendulum about as far as you could pull it in the pro-environmental direction. And while there were lots of different forces that were out there, I think that it is not an exaggeration to say that Earth Day was a proximate cause. That's to say, if Earth Day had not happened, those subsequent things would not have occurred.